For those that don't remember, in 2013, Kentucky was able to bring in an absolutely insane recruiting class. A class which featured 6 5-star recruits, with 5 of them being top 10 players in the 2013 class. This recruiting haul for Kentucky is, at least on paper, arguably the greatest recruiting class in the history of college basketball. But what happened to all these talented players after arriving at Kentucky? Did they all go on to be dominant players for the Wildcats? Or did some fall into role player status, or even end up transferring out? And who in the group would go on to find success in the NBA? Well, today I'm going to analyze each of their basketball careers after high school and figure out what exactly happened to each player and where they are now. I'm going to be going in order from the lower rated guys in the class and then going up in rating, so be sure to stick around to the end to find out what happened to all the heavy hitting 5-stars from this Kentucky class. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more sports content. Now without further ado, let's get started. Coming in as the lowest rated recruit in Kentucky's 2013 class was Dominique Wilkins, a 3-star point guard out of Madison Central. In his final high school season, he put up averages of over 20 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists, leading his team to a state championship and being named Kentucky's Mr. Basketball. For most other college programs, Hawkins would have likely been the highest rated player in their recruiting cycle for that year. So the fact that this is the lowest rated player from Kentucky's class hopefully helps give some perspective on just how insane their recruiting haul in 2013 was. However, the unfortunate reality of him being the lowest rated guy in the class was that it was going to be very difficult to earn minutes in the rotation, having to compete with all the 4 and 5-star talents on the roster. And in his first 3 seasons at Kentucky, that's precisely what would happen, failing to surpass even 10 minutes per game after a few years in the program. And in the limited action he did see, he didn't look all that impressive, averaging just 1 point per game on abysmal shooting percentages during that span. But luckily in his senior season, he would finally get a good amount of playing time, bumping up to almost 20 minutes a game. However, more minutes unfortunately didn't really equate to much better play or efficiency, averaging just 4 points a game on 40% shooting from the field and 33% from 3. After a rather lackluster college career, Hawkins would go on to go undrafted and play overseas for a short time. However, nowadays he's since hung up the cleats and is now serving as a personal basketball trainer for young athletes. Although he never really panned out at Kentucky, you've got to respect him for sticking around all 4 years and accepting his role. Besides, at the end of the day, he was still a part of some dominant Wildcat teams and got to play with some incredible basketball players during his time there. Up next is 4-star small forward out of Bullitt East High School, Derek Willis, who was actually the first player to commit in this 2013 class. In his senior season of high school, Willis averaged over 17 points and 9 rebounds, and being as he was also from Kentucky, he had several games competing both with and against just discussed Dominique Hawkins. After getting to Kentucky, Willis would face an uphill battle for playing time, with Kentucky being loaded at the wing and forward positions at the time, and thus, his first 2 years at Kentucky, he'd see very little action. His patience would end up paying off in his junior season, however, averaging 7 points and 4 rebounds a game. His increase in playing time largely came as a result of his great improvements as an outside shooter, hitting threes at a 44% clip that year, which made him quite a mismatch for opposing bigs and was where a lot of his value in the rotation lied. And in his senior season, Willis would serve a very similar role for the Wildcats, and additionally put up very similar production, averaging 7 points and 5 rebounds. Following his time at Kentucky, he proceeded to go undrafted and wind up playing a season in the G League for the Grand Rapids Drive. But after just 1 year there, he decided to sign and play overseas in Germany and has since played for several different clubs in Europe, including those in Italy and Spain. Overall, although he was never a star player at Kentucky, he did prove to be a solid role player and contributor in the rotation for a couple seasons. Moving on now to the first 5-star in Kentucky's 2013 class, we've got power forward Marcus Lee out of Deer Valley High School. And in his senior campaign, he put up some of the most absurd stats I've ever seen in high school basketball, averaging 17 points, 19 rebounds, and 6 blocks a game. And just an interesting little piece of information, his 6 blocks a game his senior season was actually down from his 9 blocks per game his junior season, which is just absolutely crazy to me and honestly kind of funny to think about. Like, just imagine seeing one dude racking up almost double-digit blocks every game. Just absolute craziness. But anyways, in his first 2 years for the Wildcats, he'd see very limited action on the court, being yet another victim to Kentucky's very unfortunate problem of having too many talented 5-stars at the same position. But in the sparing minutes he did play, he did show a lot of promise and was eventually able to set himself up to be a prime contributor his junior season for the Wildcats. And in his first year receiving quality playing time, he put up pretty respectable stats of 6 points, 6 rebounds, and a block and a half per game, going on to declare for the NBA draft. However, he'd eventually decide to pull his name out of the draft and return to college. However, it wouldn't be for the Wildcats, as he'd instead make the decision to transfer to the University of California. And after having to sit out a year due to transfer rules at the time, Lee would wrap up his collegiate career with a strong season, averaging 11 points and 7 rebounds a game. After college, he unfortunately wouldn't have much better luck in the draft the second time around, going undrafted, but would go on to play 2 seasons for the Sioux Falls Skyforce in the G League. In his 2 years there, he unfortunately never got the call-up to the NBA, and after a short stint in the G League, he'd go on to sign a contract to play overseas, where he's been ever since. Although his time at Kentucky was mostly unnoteworthy, it's undeniable that he was a highly talented player, as shown by his strong season at Cal. I do wonder how his basketball career would have been different had he chosen to play his college hoops somewhere else after high school, but at this point, we'll unfortunately never know. Up next is the second small forward in Kentucky's 2013 class, 5-star James Young out of Rochester High School. In his senior year, Young was one of the most dynamic players in all of high school basketball, averaging an impressive 25 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, and over 2 steals a game. With his proficient all-around game, he was expected to be an instant contributor in his freshman season at Kentucky, and he certainly lived up to those expectations. After establishing himself as the starting small forward right out of the gate, he'd go on to have a strong freshman season, averaging 14 points and 4 rebounds a game. And after a strong first collegiate season, he was projected as a mid to late first round talent, with some experts even believing he could go as high as the early teens. While he didn't go quite that high, Young would still be selected in the first round with the 17th pick by the Boston Celtics. There were certainly high hopes for him in Boston, but unfortunately his rookie season would be derailed by injuries that would cause him to miss both the summer league as well as most of training camp. And with both of those being key developmental times for young players, this would obviously be a major setback for him early in his career. When he did eventually return to action, he'd mainly spend time in the G League, but did see limited NBA action, although not being very noteworthy in those opportunities. And this trend would continue for the next 2 seasons before the Celtics ultimately decided to not bring him back. And after struggling to stay on G League rosters the next few years, Young would decide to pack his bags and head overseas, where he's been playing ever since. Although his time at Kentucky was very short-lived, he certainly was an incredible player his lone season there, and is yet another player in Kentucky's long lineage of one-and-done talents. Filling in the dedicated center spot in this Kentucky recruiting class is 5-star Dakari Johnson out of St. Patrick High School. Originally a part of the 2014 class, Johnson would decide to reclassify to the 2013 class after putting up a strong high school season, averaging 17 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 blocks a game. His size and rim protecting ability led many to believe that he was going to be an absolute force on the interior for the Wildcats, but unfortunately, he never quite became the impact player at the college level that many expected him to be. In his 2 seasons at Kentucky, he largely played in a backup role, having to sit behind several talented Kentucky big men like Karl Anthony Towns, Willie Cauley-Stein, and Julius Randle, who I'm going to discuss a bit later in this video. He was decently productive in the minutes he did play, averaging 6 points and 4 rebounds a game in his collegiate career, but his lack of playing time really held him back from living up to his true potential. Nonetheless, after a disappointing sophomore season, Johnson would declare for the NBA draft, and luckily, despite his limited college production, several NBA scouts and front offices looked past that and thought they could tap into his underutilized potential, and the Oklahoma City Thunder would wind up taking a flyer on him with the 48th pick in the second round, with the expectation that he'd be a bit of a multi-year project type of player. With him being viewed as a developmental prospect, he'd obviously spend most of his time in the G League, but he did get some NBA opportunities as well, although not being much of a contributor in the games he did play. He'd eventually go on to fizzle out of the G League, and as of now is playing overseas in China. He certainly had all the hype and potential in the world heading to Kentucky, and while his time there wasn't bad by any means, he simply proved to be yet another player whose collegiate career at Kentucky was hindered due to their excess of talent. Up next is actually going to be a bit of a 2-for-1 with twin brothers Andrew and Aaron Harrison. Hailing from William B. Travis High School, both brothers were listed as 5-star recruits, with Andrew being looked at as more of a point guard and Aaron being viewed as more of a shooting guard wing hybrid type of player. Upon signing to Kentucky, many people were curious to see how their twin dynamic would play out at the collegiate level, and luckily for the Kentucky faithful, things would work out pretty good. Both would wind up playing 2 seasons with the Wildcats, and they were quickly able to establish themselves as one of the best backcourt duos in the country. Aaron would have the slightly more productive college career as a scorer, averaging 12 points per game, but Andrew wasn't too far off, averaging a little over 10 a game, while also flashing a bit more as a facilitator. Despite both players having identical builds and very similar playstyles, only one of them would end up being drafted, with Andrew being selected with the 44th pick in the second round by the Memphis Grizzlies. Aaron, however, would still find his way onto an NBA roster, being picked up by the Charlotte Hornets. In terms of their NBA careers, Aaron's was easily the more underwhelming of the two, seeing only a handful of NBA NBA action with no meaningful production, eventually fizzling out of the NBA entirely after just 3 seasons. Andrew, however, would find a bit more success, having a few productive seasons with the Grizzlies, even serving as the team's starting point guard in the 2017 season. However, after being let go by the Grizzlies, he never really got the same type of opportunity with any other team, and like his brother, would wind up fizzling out of the NBA after just a few seasons. Although their NBA careers didn't quite pan out, the Harrison twins' time at Kentucky was certainly memorable and provided fans with one of the coolest dynamics in the history of college basketball. I mean, even if you're not a Kentucky fan, you've got to admit that watching a set of twins wreak havoc together on the college level was pretty awesome to see. Last but not least is the headliner of this loaded 2013 Kentucky recruiting class, 5-star power forward Julius Randle out of Prestonwood Christian High School. Being the #1 player in Kentucky's class and the #3 overall player in all of high school that year, Randle was expected to make an immediate impact his freshman season, with a high likelihood of him being a one-and-done player. And that's exactly how things would wind up playing out, with him having a very impressive freshman season, averaging 15 points, 10 rebounds, and creating countless highlights along the way. And after a stellar collegiate season, Randle would go on to declare for the NBA draft, being selected 7th overall by the Los Angeles Lakers. During his time in LA, he showed great development season to season, eventually working his way up to over 16 points and 8 rebounds a game by his 4th season. However, in what some would call a questionable move, the Lakers decided not to offer him a contract extension, letting him walk in free agency, eventually signing a contract with the New Orleans Pelicans. However, his time there would last just 1 season after he declined the second-year player option on his contract. And after signing a pretty sizable contract with the Knicks in 2019, Randle has since blossomed into an all-star caliber player, racking up 3 all-star team selections in his 5 seasons there. Although many will hesitate to call him a franchise cornerstone type of player or question his ability to be the #1 option for a winning team, there's no denying that he's one of the best power forwards in the NBA when he's playing at his best. And I'm very curious to see how he performs these next couple seasons as he begins to get up there in age. Overall though, Randle was certainly deserving to be the headlining player in Kentucky's 2013 recruiting class, as shown by his domination at the college level and impressive play in the NBA. So that was every player from Kentucky's 2013 recruiting class and where they are now. For those curious about how this Kentucky team performed in the 2013-2014 season, with all 8 recruits on the roster, they'd go on to finish the season with a 29-11 record and making a March Madness tournament run all the way to the championship game, where they would eventually be taken down by UConn in a 6-point loss. Overall, despite this being arguably the best recruiting class of all time on paper, in reality, there was definitely some mixed results, with some of the players never really getting an opportunity to play for the Wildcats, others playing well in college but flunking out of the NBA, and Julius Randle being the only player to find success at the NBA level. This 2013 Kentucky recruiting class serves as just another example that, although stars and ratings are exciting to look at the end of the day, it's all just projections, and nobody truly knows how a player will pan out in the future. Be sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to the channel for more sports content. If you have any thoughts on any of the players in the video, or have suggestions for other recruiting classes you want me to cover, be sure to leave a comment down below. This is HCP signing off. As always, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'm out. Peace.